All right, everybody, welcome to the Sports and Nothing Else podcast. You may be thinking to yourself, that's not Kyle. It's because we got more handsome guests than Kyle. Little older, but a little bigger head. This is Joel, my friend Joel. He's been on before. He helped us break down the NFC. Kyle texted me this morning. He said, I'm not feeling better today. In fact, I pooped my pants this morning. So Kyle's got the stomach flu, and we're glad to have Joel on. So welcome. How are you?
Doing well. I have to disagree with a couple things you already said. So we're off to a great start. Like, Kyle is way better looking than me.
Or me.
Also more knowledgeable. He's just better. I'm just here to provide some form of lunacy and maybe some brevity to the podcast. So I'm happy to be back.
You'll fit right in. Well, we got a new sponsor, mostly because I just want to drink this. Red's Apple Ale, new sponsor.
Yeah.
I don't really drink at all, but if I do, it will be a fruity beverage. I can tell you that. So here we are. If we want to talk about bourbon, we can have some of our other friends on, but I sure can't. So, all right. We're in the swing of football season. We've had 6 weeks. Both of our teams look remarkably mediocre. But I made you do some homework. So we're going to start here. Who are your most disappointing teams so far?
Yeah, I think this is easy for me. I think my fandom, I have to start there. The 49ers are extremely disappointing to me this season. I was hoping for more. I was hoping that they could rekindle some of that 2019 magic. Jimmy G was back healthy. They got a backup quarterback that can help them. But pretty much all they've done is get more and more injured week in and week out. Their coaching has been poor. I'm going to be honest with you. Real poor. Decision-making, not real great. Poor execution. They've lost some close games. They could have beat Green Bay. They really should have beat Seattle. And, frankly, they've been in tight matchups. But teams that go on to win the Super Bowl win the close games. They don't find ways to lose the close games. And so I'm looking at their schedule going out, too. They have to play Cincinnati as their 17th game this year, and that's a loss. They have to play Tennessee. That's a loss. I think, honestly, this week against Indianapolis on Sunday Night Football, that's a loss. I don't see much hope for them. I really don't. So that's where I'm starting with my most disappointing teams. I'm going to say this, too. Raheem Mostert, right? I was really excited to have him back full strength this year. He had 2 carries, and then he's out for the season. 2 carries. So being a fan of the 49ers is a little tough right now. George Kittle's on IR. Jason Verrett, their top corners, on IR. And it's tough to win games when you don't have your full assembly of players on the field week in and week out. So that's where I'm starting with everything. Who's yours?
Well, I made a list of teams I thought we could hit. They're on my list.
For sure.
To me, currently the most disappointing team, because I thought they were going to be really scrappy, might be the Dolphins. They're 1-5. They've lost to some bad teams. They made the Colts look awesome, which is not an easy feat. I don't know. I thought they were going to be a 500-ish team and maybe sneak to 10-7, and they're going to be, and they don't have their first round pick. It goes to Philly. They moved up to draft a wide receiver when they could have drafted a couple clones of him from the same college a couple picks later. I don't know. So they're disappointing. Do you have any other teams that are on your radar as disappointing?
Yeah, I think definitely. There's a few. I would agree with the Miami choice. I mean, they just got beat by Jacksonville. Jacksonville snapped a 20-game losing streak.
20.
Against Miami in London. I mean, and honestly, that could have been the best game of last week. It was a really entertaining game. I was listening to it while I was doing some work around the house, but it was just to the wire. So, yeah, I think the Dolphins are on that list. I think one of the teams that's on that list for me that is going to be on my top 10 list of teams as well is the Kansas City Chiefs. I think they are a team that is underachieving at all levels. Patrick Mahomes is turning the ball over at a ridiculous rate. Their defense is terrible. I mean, literally terrible. And so you have to be disappointed if you're a Chiefs fan. And I look at they're going up against Tennessee this week. Yep. And Tennessee looked like world beaters. So you could end up with a losing record 7 weeks into the season. That's got to be disappointing if you're Kansas City. I think if you're Seattle, you've got to be extremely disappointed at 2-4. That's a really disappointing record. I think there's a lot of bright spots around the NFL, but there's also a lot of teams that are already thinking about what they're going to do in 2022. Yeah. A few of those teams are teams that might shock us, like Seattle. I just don't see Seattle improving a whole lot, even if Russell Wilson comes back. They might be a 500 type team, but they're losing to teams that they shouldn't lose to at this point. So I think they're extremely disappointing. I think, like you and Kyle talked about last week, week one is always a liar. It never tells the truth. But if you were a Saints fan after week one, you had high hopes. And now you're looking at your team and saying, probably not going to compete. So if you're a Saints fan, I think that's disappointing as well. Apart from that, I don't know. There's not a whole lot of surprises. I think you could parcel out a lot of different disappointments for some teams that, as we look back at this, even at the end of the season, we might say, oh, well, we were wrong about them. They turned it around.
Yeah, the two teams on my list that I think are going to be fine are the Browns and the Chiefs. We're both 3-3, and I think both have designs on making the AFC Championship game at least, and have certainly underachieved so far. The Browns are really beat up. Their injury list is and they play Thursday, which could make it worse. If they lose to the Broncos, it might be a little bit of panic time. So we'll see there. The rest of my list these are not, I had higher hopes for the Falcons than you did, if you remember our over-under podcasts, but they're terrible. Their 2-3 record belies how bad they are. And then Washington, I just thought their defense would be better. It's terrible. And the Giants are one of the worst teams in the NFL, and I thought they would be scrappy too, and they are not. And Daniel Jones, it's time to be done with that.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, the performance that they put on the field on Sunday, I know they play the Rams, and the Rams are a top tier team. They're in the bubble to be a Super Bowl winner this year. But I mean, you got embarrassed. And in the NFL, when you get embarrassed like that, those are big red flags. It's hard to blow out a team in the NFL. It really is. That blowouts don't occur very often, especially with the way offenses can move the ball, the way defenses get penalized for everything these days. You should be able to score points, and the Giants can't put it together. So I think, you're spot on with that one. Case Keenum's going to start Thursday night for the Browns too, by the way.
Yikes. Yeah, that's the old Case Keenum-Teddy Bridgewater matchup. It might be a game to spend some time with your wives instead of watch football, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
By the way, I wanted to mention, this week is a catastrophe fantasy football-wise with the byes. Chargers, Cowboys, Bills, even Jacksonville. A lot of people have James Robinson, and there's a couple of other teams. It's a mess. And I, as someone who has Herbert and Mike Williams stacked in 2 leagues, it's a problem. So anyhow, I'm playing against 2 teams that both have Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, so at least making do there. But that leads us to surprising teams, because the Cowboys are on the top of my list. We're really skeptical on this podcast about the Cowboys, and I think rightfully so, but we're going to have to eat that one, it looks like.
Yeah, I'm already eating my words on them. They have put it together. Now, I will say this, as a caveat, they have not played a strong schedule. The only team that I would consider a top-tier team that they've played is Tampa Bay, and though they gave Tampa Bay everything they had, they still got beat by Tampa Bay.
In normal fashion, too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and honestly, kudos to them for winning in New England. Playing in New England and winning there is difficult. And again, to use a common team, Tampa Bay went into New England, return of Tom Brady, and played a real sloppy game. They ended up winning. It's a tough place to play. Cowboys went in and won a game there. So that's credit to them. But they really should have lost. And if it weren't for Mac Jones throwing a stupid pick six to Diggs, they lose that game too. So, that's 5-1, but it really could be easily 4-2. And through 6 opponents that aren't very solid, I think that they're a good team and they've stayed healthy and they're well coached. I like Mike McCarthy. I like what he's done in Dallas.
Team management, not great, but he's clearly coaching the teams well. And Kellen Moore is obviously, that offense is incredible.
Yeah, and I'll be interested to see how they finish the season. But you're right. Right now, they've got to be one of the most surprising teams.
Well, I have a question for you, because you know way more about football than I do and defensive scheme and all of that. Diggs, who has 7 interceptions in 6 games, which is tied for the record with Rod Woodson, has also given up, is in the top 5 of giving up yards when thrown to. Do you think that the interception numbers are inflated, or he's talked some about this. Do you think it's more like he's baiting quarterbacks and he knows he's going to get them eventually, but he's giving up cushion sometimes that maybe he doesn't even need to try to. It's almost like Manny Ramirez used to intentionally swing terribly at breaking balls early in games to get somebody when it really matters. Do you think that's what he's doing, or the interceptions are a little bit lucky?
I do not think that he is baiting quarterbacks. I saw a statistic from Pro Football Focus that talked about how basically corners throughout the NFL, how much cushion they give up per route, right? And that can be indicative of a corner that probably plays a little bit too aggressively. So when I read those stats, to me, that's a guy who is taking every chance in the world. And so far, a lot of them have worked out, which is great. But the flip side of that is he's also giving up a lot to a lot of receivers. And so that well will dry up. Turnovers are one of the craziest statistics in football when you really break it down. A lot of it is luck. The ball bounces to you. It tips off of somebody else. You're in the right place at the right time. And that's not to say that he's not an excellent corner, because I think he is. I think he's super skilled. I mean, his brother's one of the best receivers in the NFL. There's a lot going on there for those people. But some of it is luck, and some of it has to do with basically that oblong object that has laces on it bounces funny, and sometimes it goes right to you. Some of the best defenders are some that have the worst stats. And defense is one of those things where you're tracking sacks, you're tracking interceptions, you're tracking fumble recoveries, you're tracking forced fumbles. But those things can lie a little bit, because you might have a guy who's putting a ton of pressure on the quarterback but never getting sacks. Yeah. That doesn't mean that they're not an effective defender. It just means that maybe scheme-wise they're not given the opportunities, or they're trying to give opportunities to their other teammates. But it can't keep up at this rate for Diggs. It just can't.
Well, I guess that was my, Jalen Ramsey, you don't even bother throwing the ball to where Jalen Ramsey is. And that's right. Not happening with Diggs right now. So I'm always interested as someone who watches a lot of football, but, I can't go, if you sent me the fancy whatever it's called game footage and asked me to break it down, I can't do it. When you used to play Madden against me, you just not only were you better at the game, you also schemed me out of the game too. I don't know how to. So I'm always interested to talk to you about that stuff. So, I had one more question on the 49ers actually. We're on year 3 of them just being hurt. At a certain point, did they just have injury-prone guys? Because that's a lot of luck too, is staying healthy. But if it happens over and over again, do you feel like you have a team full of guys with red flags, or is it just a really unlucky stretch?
Well, frankly, from a coaching standpoint, from an organizational standpoint, I think they really have to look at the practices that they use with their training of athletes, because they are leading the league since 2013. They lead the league in torn ACLs. That is no joke. They have more than any other team by a lot. And it's not just those types of things. I actually heard John Lynch talk about this in an interview he did this week. And he said they've changed their philosophy around injury. They used to push guys a little bit more to play. And now they're more careful. They put guys on IR. Now with the IR rules changing, you can put a guy on IR and they have to miss 3 games. Then they can come back, which is good. But I think it's a mixture of a couple things. If I was that organization, I would be looking at the practices that we're doing around training athletes. I would also be examining, what kind of load are you putting on players in practice? And what are you asking them to do? And is it preparing them for the physicality of a full-on football game?
Sure.
And if it's not, that's probably part of the problem. I will tell you this, though. Like Kittle's injury, it was because of a horrible Jimmy G throw. He lays him out to dry, and Kittle is bent over backwards like a piece of salami. Jimmy G was out with a bruise. He had a contusion to his calf. I played a lot of football games in my day and got a lot of bruises and a lot of dings and a lot of, throughout my college career, probably my left shoulder was never healthy. It just never was. And every year you'd re-injure it, but you play through some of that too. Now, is that the right thing to do? I don't know. I'm not sure that it is. I mean, I still have issues with it today, but that's partially a change in philosophy too. I think that the 49ers have done that. I will say this though, DeForest Buckner, who's playing for the Colts, who the 49ers are playing against this week, played in 66 of 67 games that he could have played with the 49ers during his time with them. Really, really impressive, especially for playing defensive tackle.
Yeah.
And they got rid of him because his salary was going to be so high. And so they said, well, we would rather have 2 players and the 13th overall draft pick than keep DeForest Buckner and pay him what he deserves to be paid, which I guess I understand that from a business standpoint. But you look at who they've replaced Buckner with, they haven't produced and they haven't been available. Kinlaw will probably not play this Sunday night, and DeForest Buckner will. And he's always on the field, always making a difference. And that intangible he brings too, he's a locker room guy. He brings people together. And it's a big part of a football team. When you got 52 guys on the roster, you got to gel those people together. And to just let go of somebody because they're going to cost a little bit might not always be the best choice. So I don't have a whole lot of confidence in San Francisco. I don't know what's going on with that organization. I think they're poorly coached, poorly run right now. And things have to change with that for them to get better.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to pick your brain on one more thing because we're talking about injury stuff. Did you see the interview Tom Brady did right before the season where he talked about like the safety the NFL has done and it really should be the responsibility of quarterbacks and that kind of thing? Because I remember Peyton Manning got Austin Collie nearly killed like 3 times in one season. And yes, it was brutal, but it kind of felt like his fault. I didn't really want to ever blame anything on Peyton Manning, but he really did run him into traffic like 3 times in a 6-week span, and he just couldn't play then for weeks. So what were your thoughts on Brady basically saying like the NFL in a lot of ways has taken proper technique out of the game because in the hope of player safety when players should be doing a better job taking care of themselves, basically? What do you think about that?
I think Tom Brady is wise. I think he's spot on. I think he couldn't have said it any better. And I think it would behoove the NFL to listen to their greatest player of all time. I will tell you this,
right?
though. No, that's Tom Brady. I wish. It used to be. Maybe. I'll tell you this, though. 2 things. A receiver is only as good as their quarterback, no matter who they are. Now, there's a few exceptions to that. Randy Moss, Jerry Rice, Terrell Owens. There's a few exceptions to that. But all of those guys had some good quarterbacks at times as well. And you can't get the ball if you can't have somebody throw it to you that's at least somewhat competent. But anyway, that's off track. Brady was spot on. But the NFL had a plan, and it started probably 10 years ago at about that 2009, 2010 time, the NFL saw that the PR around concussions, head injuries, things like that was really bad for them. And they started to change every rule, and they started to change the way that they talked about football. They created leagues for kids that had flag football instead of tackle, which is really smart business, really smart business. But I saw an ad last week while watching the Red Zone that the NFL played during their games, and it was all about how the game is growing now. So maybe they're accomplishing what their goal was to grow the game. But Brady is right. And even in his career, you could probably split his career into thirds.
Mm-hmm.
And in the most recent third of his career, you don't have to do much as a quarterback apart from throw the ball up. You're either going to get a penalty against the defense, or you're going to get a ridiculous catch by your receiver. And there's nothing to lose. So a guy like Brady can play until he's 50 because the NFL protects him. It's different than it used to be.
Yeah, no, you're right. And he might. I mean, goodness gracious, guy's still in the top tier of quarterbacks at 44, almost 45. All right, we named one surprising team and then went very far off book, but enjoyed it a lot. Do you have anyone else besides the Cowboys down as your surprising teams? I have 3 more written down as possibilities.
Yeah, I think Las Vegas is surprising to me. I thought they would get obliterated last week with all of the Gruden controversy. Yeah, I mean, but they didn't. And kudos to them. I think Derek Carr is the reason for that. The reason for that. He's playing at a high level. Honestly, I think the Arizona Cardinals top that list. I had them as a mediocre team, and they are moving the ball on everybody, and they're scoring big points. AJ Green looks like AJ Green of 6 years ago. He's insane. And their defense is really solid. Adding J.J. Watt was a huge piece for them. So those are my surprising teams.
My only other one, and I don't want to spend a lot of time here, but I got to watch them play the Packers a couple of weeks ago, is the Bengals, who I don't think it's fake. Their defense is really fast, and Burrow is as tough as it gets. I mean, I don't think he's going to play all 17 games because he had a lacerated throat the other day. They cannot protect him at all. Now, Jamar Chase is incredible, but not drafting a lineman may mean that Jamar Chase doesn't have a quarterback within a couple of years.
Yeah.
But they just can't protect Burrow at all. But that division is looking really interesting because the Steelers are going to hang around and be mediocre. Big Ben is done. He's toast. But the infrastructure of that team is still strong. The Ravens look awesome. We'll get to them in a second with power rankings. And then the Bengals are fun, and the Browns, everybody, including me, thought they were going to go deep. So, yeah, we'll see. So, all right. Anything that jumped out to you week 6 wise before we get into our power rankings and our amended Super Bowl pick? At least for me, it's going to be.
Yeah, mine too. I'm just going to run through these quick notes that I've got. Just very fast, rapid fire. Rams, super impressive. To blow anybody out, that's huge. King Henry, Tennessee, when he goes off, they could beat anybody. They're fantastic. I will say this, though. Buffalo, 2 field goals in their first 2 drives rather than converting touchdowns. They would have won the game anyway, even with King Henry going off. So Buffalo is super strong.
And that's happened. I watched them play the Texans, in which they won 41-0. But they kicked a whole bunch of field goals with short field because Davis Webb was just literally throwing them the ball. And it's worrisome because that's the Josh Allen, like, is he really as accurate as he was last year? And I'm not sure the answer is yes, if you can't convert in the red zone, which is where all those windows shorten. And so, I don't know. Anyhow.
The careers of people like Josh Allen, even Patrick Mahomes, are all because of similar things that we just talked about. The NFL is different. The rules are different. A quarterback can sit back there confidently and know he's not going to get smashed. And these guys with rocket arms can just stand back there and chuck the ball deep, and they're doing it, and they're doing it really well. A couple of the things that stood out, you already mentioned the AFC North. what a wild divisions that's going to be. Bengals and Ravens this week. We just did our picks that we do as a family. I picked the Bengals. I think their defense is legit. And also Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, they look fantastic. We'll get to them, but they're up and down too. And I know they're 5-1, but they've had a couple things go their way.
Put them away. I mean, come on.
Yes.
Jeez.
Yes. Colts should have won that game. That was one of the most frustrating games to watch this year.
Yeah, I'm aware.
That was so ridiculous.
Why do you think I'm
And then the last thing I wrote down is, I own you.
Oh. Tom Brady did an interview with Jim Gray this week and was laughing. He was like, I didn't even know Aaron Rodgers owned part of Soldier Field. He's got a great future after football. But yeah, he's not wrong. He lost 3 times to the Bears. He's been their quarterback for forever.
Yep.
Yeah, he's not wrong. I mean, for me, again, owning a lot of Chargers in fantasy, I watched that Baltimore Chargers game, and it was maddening. But the Ravens, that's a big one. 34-6 against a team that would almost beat the Cowboys, and then has beat the Chiefs.
Yeah,
the Chargers are really good, and to just pound them to death that was a weird one.
Impressive.
And then the other one is the Cardinals. I mean, going into Cleveland and winning 37-14. And just being Cliff Kingsbury, you don't think like, oh, his teams will be physical, but they're actually physical. I mean, they went in there and out-physicaled the Browns, who are a pretty physical team, and to just lay it on them. And that was really, really good. And then it's just fun to watch Geno Smith a little bit, just because he's been gone for so long. He's no good, but that was interesting. So, and the Colts won 31-3. So.
Yeah, that was a huge win for them, and they looked good. Let me tell you what the difference for the Colts was. T.Y. Hilton.
Listen, when he's on the field, man,
he's good.
He's good,
and he gives a quarterback a ton of confidence, which, no offense, but Wentz needs that. He needs that confidence. He needs that for sure. That's that Cardinals-Browns game as well. It was 37-14, but 7 of those points came off of a Hail Mary for the Browns. Yeah. So it really could have been 37-7.
Yeah.
Yeah, just demolished.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, you want to get to these power rankings?
Yeah, let's do it.
You know what? Actually, we're going to break up these segments. You got a thing you hate this week?
Oh. Yeah. Well, okay, So my family and I just got back from a really long trip. We went down to Hilton Head Island in South Carolina.
Looked like a blast.
Oh, it was wonderful. It was not free from its frustration when you take a 3-year-old and a 10-month-old on vacation. It's tough. And as you know, 16 hours of driving is a lot for anybody. And we broke it up into 2 days, which was smart for us to, keep everybody fresh, because we also took 3 old people with us. No offense to my parents or my in-laws, but we took 3 old people with us, and they're helpful as all get out, but they're also old, so you have to kind of break things up for them. And my thing that I absolutely hate is people who don't know how to use a cruise control in 2021. When you are driving on the highway and you pass me as if I was standing still, and then seconds later, I am rolling past you as if you weren't driving, that's a problem. And not only is it a problem, but it's dangerous.
Yes.
And it just, I hate it. Every car has cruise control nowadays. I mean, even looking at the oldest cars on the road have some form of cruise control. Just set it and then watch the road and do your duty as a driver. And please put your phone down. Those 2 things would have made my life so much easier and made me feel more comfortable about carrying my family in a death trap from here to South Carolina and back. And it just seems like an easy thing. That's the thing I hate.
It does, doesn't it? We're going to get to some car stories later. But I saw this multiple places. Okay, so you had this week the John Gruden stuff, which I'm not going to go into. It's not a controversial take. Okay, the guy has to go.
Yeah.
But I saw a lot of people, I don't know what they're cheering for exactly, mentioning about the halftime show this year and how certainly in their lyrics of some of those people, they have more or similarly offensive things that to what John Gruden said. To my point, my issue is not. I mean, I agree technically. I mean, like some of those guys, like, what songs are you going to sing out of your catalog? Like, really, the halftime show. But
It's true.
it doesn't. Like, this is one of those where it's like, sure, but don't. Are you making excuses for John Gruden? Like the stuff he said is abhorrent and homophobic and racist, and like the guy, you, there's no argument for him. So like, sure, maybe your point is true, but it doesn't justify this other thing over here. And those people aren't employees of the NFL. Like,
Right.
I'm an employee of a church. If someone that goes to our church and maybe even volunteers on the worship team tweets out some gross stuff, but like I'm emailing grosser stuff, we're not going to be like, well, look at this person over here. It's like, no, I'm fired and I should be because I'm an employee. People's tithes are paying my money.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't absolve me of anything. So yes, maybe the halftime show is a little tone deaf considering what's going on with John Gruden, but it doesn't absolve him of a single thing that he did or said. And he had to go. He just had to.
Yeah, and I know we don't want to dig into it too much, but that was going to be, I debated on two things that I hate. And the other thing that I hate is Occam's razor. You know, we've heard of Occam's razor. It's a philosophical idea that the simplest thing is often the correct thing.
Mm-hmm.
And too often in the world we live in today with social media, people conflate things to make the point that they want to be made, right? So if you come into this situation with a bias and you want to say, well, but look at all these other people, you're not addressing the real issue. What you're doing is moving the camera to look at something else. And that doesn't help the situation. The truth of the matter is Gruden might act completely differently today. Let's just assume that he does. Why would you ever email anything of that derivation to anyone ever? Email, I mean, whether you believe that or not, if you put it in an email, it's there forever. And you have said those things, and those things can be attached to you. And that, I mean, not only that, but he called what was the boss of the NFL, the commissioner of the NFL, some pretty egregious things.
Whoa, boy.
And so then we're just supposed to turn the other cheek. And sure, I am fully for forgiveness. I need it every day. But that doesn't mean that I should be absolved of consequence either.
Yeah.
You know, and you're right. If you're employed by somebody, that's different than somebody hiring you in to do a halftime show. They're not employed by the NFL.
No. I mean, one of my favorite, sometimes in jest, but I'll bring up the scripture verse of removing the plank from your own eye before taking the speck out of somebody else's. And a lot of those arguments end up that way. Like, I don't want you to look at my stuff, so I'm going to deflect over there. And that it doesn't work. So good riddance, John Gruden. Don't ever come back. Like, sorry. See you later. And he saved the Raiders a lot of money. We'll say that because I don't think he was going to make it that 10 years. Anyhow, let's move on. All right, here's how I want to do the power rankings. We'll start at the 10th one because I'm really interested to see what your list looks like. I mean, I think the top of ours is going to end up fairly similar, but we'll see where the discrepancies are, and then we'll argue if we need to in a friendly way because we actually like it. This is not a Stephen A. Smith, Max Kellerman type situation. It's not our issue. So
no.
All right, who's your 10th team?
Okay, so am I allowed to split 10th into two teams?
Of course, 10A, 10B.
Okay. 10A and 10B are both from the AFC West. 10B the Las Vegas Raiders. I think they're doing enough to deserve to be in the top 10. But there were so many good teams that I felt like deserved the top 10. I couldn't decide between these two teams. I think the Raiders winning amidst all of the Gruden nonsense was really impressive to me. That can be a huge distraction, and for them to still win was awesome. And then 10A is the Kansas City Chiefs. Though they've been difficult, they haven't been up to expectation, and they've struggled a lot. I think we're going to look back at this, and pretty soon they'll be in the top 5, top 3, top 2 of a lot of these top 10 lists. This will be a distant memory pretty quickly for the Chiefs. But those are my my two tens for you.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you started the playoffs today, and I don't think the Chiefs would actually make it, but let's say they were the 7th seed, I'm not sure you'd bet against them in the AFC, really.
No.
And that's the power of Patrick Mahomes, really. So my 10th team, I didn't know where to put this team because they have been all over the place, is the Tennessee Titans. They are my 10th team. They had one of the best wins of the year last 2 nights ago. I mean, the Bills are absolutely rolling, but I don't trust the Titans at all. They can't defend. And if Derrick Henry doesn't do anything, they haven't proven they have the ability to win games. So, but he does make it look like he's playing against middle schoolers sometimes. It's pretty remarkable. So
it's insane. Where is Kyle? Where is Kyle? We're talking about the Titans, and he's not even here.
He's throwing up somewhere. He's going to love that I mentioned all that. All right. Who's your 9th team?
Number 9, the Dallas Cowboys.
All right.
The only reason I have them that low is because of the strength of their schedule so far, and we already talked about it. I think
it's getting much harder, by the way.
Right, and I think their record is going to be indicative of a team that looks better on paper than they actually are. And again, the ball has bounced their way. Now, I cannot diminish this. Cannot diminish the play of Dak Prescott. He looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and he deserves all the credit in the world. And again, he's got great play caller, and his head coach is offensive oriented as well. So that bodes well for them down the stretch. They could be an easily top 5 team for a lot of people. I just hate them, so that's why they're not.
That's fair. My number 9 team is the team I think has their record is least indicative of how they've played. It's the Green Bay Packers. They're not 5-1 by what I see on the field, but they are because Rodgers knows how to win games, and maybe that needs to be taken into account. But they felt like a soft 13-3 last year, and they kind of proved it in the playoffs in some ways. So I don't know what to do with them, but they may just get better and better as the year goes on. They get Bakhtiari back soon, and another offensive lineman soon after that, it looks like. So maybe all of a sudden we're going to look at them in 4 weeks and go, oh my gosh. So we'll see. So that's my 9th team. How about 8 for you?
8 is the Los Angeles Chargers.
All right. We're going to be on that one.
They have one of the best young quarterbacks in the league. I think if I was starting a franchise today, I might pick him to start my franchise. They also are putting together some good play around him, and they've got a couple of losses on the season, and both of them really, obviously they got dismantled by the Ravens, but I think they had to go across country. They were playing at 10 a.m. Pacific time, which is always the most difficult trek for any West Coast team. And you see West Coast teams lose games they shouldn't lose in weird fashion when they have to play at that 10 a.m. Eastern time, or that 1 p.m. Eastern time slot. But they played really solid, and I think they have to iron out a few things, but I love their coach. I think he's one of the sharpest minds. I love listening to his interviews. And I think he gets it. And I think those players love playing for him too. So I think the sky is the limit, and I think they're trending up. The Chargers could probably be in that top 5 conversation pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, they gave away the Cowboys game. They should be 5-0.
They did.
For sure.
Yeah.
And the refs kind of took it away from them too. I watched that game again, much riding on the Chargers being good. So including some Justin Herbert rookie cards sitting in my closet. So Anyhow,
Yes, sir.
but those are trending up, which is good. My number 18 is the Chiefs. That's really a bump for what I think is going to happen because they have not been the 8th best team in the NFL. Their defense is abhorrent. They have to try to stop Derrick Henry this week, and they haven't stopped any running backs. I don't know how they're going to stop Derrick Henry, but we'll see. So anyhow, that's it. And we don't need to spend a lot of time on them. We all expect them to round into form, but we'll see. So 7 for you.
Tennessee. I think that they are hard to put my finger on for sure. And they're kind of Jekyll and Hyde, but they're really good when Henry is running over people and doing what he did to the Bills. And I saw a statistic on Ryan Tannehill. He's got somewhere in the range of double-digit fourth quarter comebacks since he joined the Tennessee Titans. And he's a resurgent player that, when we cut the NFC podcast and we talked about Sam Darnold moving from the Jets to the Panthers and how that doesn't really change the path for most quarterbacks. Tannehill sort of did. He went from bottom barrel to now a really solid starter. And they have 2 great wide receivers that are really tough to cover. Julio Jones is still playing well. And what I can't remember the guy's name. Yes, he's a stud, and he's like Julio clone. So they've got 2 dudes who can catch the ball, move the sticks consistently. I think they're good when they're good, but they are tough to put your finger on. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Ole Miss had DK Metcalf and AJ Brown there at the same time and didn't do anything, which is remarkable. But anyhow. I mean, those guys aren't coverable by NFL cornerbacks. I don't know how they were being covered in college football, but anyhow.
Somebody's got to throw it to them.
No, that's correct. That's correct. All right, my 7th team is the Chargers. You did a good job breaking them down. Imagine being a Dolphins fan and drafting Tua in front of Justin Herbert. Oh, gosh. That's going to be like a Alex Smith, Aaron Rodgers type situation. No offense, at some point.
It will. It will, for sure.
Herbert is already right there, knocking on the doorstep. I mean, like, when the ball comes out of his hand, it's like, oh, my gosh. He doesn't throw the ball like Rodgers, but it's like you expect the ball to start, and it's still going. What's that?
Defies gravity.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. So he can spin it for sure. All right, number 6.
I have the Green Bay Packers here. I agree with you. They are the de facto top 10 team. And they just kind of slip into the top 10 by default because they beat on some bad teams. My favorite bad team should have beat them.
Yes, they should have.
Instead, they give Rodgers the ball with 37 seconds left, and then he throws it to, I don't know, Devontae Adams. Why wouldn't you cover him? That seems dumb. But so they've snuck out some wins that probably should have been losses. And I mean, they look bad sometimes, but Aaron Rodgers by himself could put a team in the top 10. And I think that's kind of what he's doing again this year. They're going to end up 12, 13 wins again, but also be kind of equivalent to some of these teams that'll end up with 9 or 8 wins potentially. Yeah. So it's Green Bay, I guess. Whatever.
So we basically just flipped 6 and 9 because I have the Cowboys at 6. And the strength of schedule thing is definitely true. But they definitely could also be 6-0 with wins over 2 teams in our top 10, the Bucs and the Chargers. I think that their record is right because I don't think they should have won the Chargers game, and I kind of feel like they should have won the Bucs game in some ways.
True.
So who knows? And again, like that Diggs pick 6. That wasn't a play that he made. That was a terrible throw by Mac Jones. Yeah. The guy was wide open. He just threw it way out in front of him. So, who knows? And we all get really excited about the Cowboys because it's just ESPN just is so happy when the Cowboys are good. And Fox is so happy. And Troy Aikman is trying to keep himself from being giggly in the box. And Tony Romo's, everyone, all of our analysts at the game of the week are Cowboys, and they show Jerry Jones 100 times. And so, we don't know. We both hate the Cowboys. That's what I know.
Yes.
My daughters were asking me, we were watching Pat's Cowboys last week, and said, "Who are you cheering for?" And I was like, honestly, I don't freaking know. I hate both these teams so much. But there we are. So I have a feeling our top 5 is, well, it definitely has the same 5 teams, it looks like, and they're probably going to be in similar order. So who's your 5th team?
Tampa Bay.
Okay.
Antonio Brown is making me feel like Antonio Brown hasn't changed since 2014. He is playing like a boss and doing everything. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, whatever. But it's Tampa Bay, and I think they're 5 just because the top 4 teams that I put ahead of them, I have to put ahead of them. But they could easily be one of those teams that at the end of the season we're looking at them and saying, yeah, they're 1 or 2 on this list. Yeah. But Tampa Bay.
I have the Ravens at 5. I don't know what to do with them. The last 2 weeks, they definitely should have lost to what I consider to be a bad team, the Colts, and could not stop. The Colts just marched up and down the field the entire game. Blankenship makes field goals and extra points. That game is never in doubt. Right. But they might have the best win of the season. I mean, to beat the Chargers by 30 points, who we both have in our 7 and 8 in our list. So I don't know. I don't know what to do with them. They probably have a better win than the Bucs do. The Bucs haven't really blown a really good team off the floor yet, which I don't know. Their defense is a lot worse than I think everybody thought it was going to be so far. So I have the Bucs at 4. You have the Bucs at 5, and I have the Ravens at 5. So I'll just give that one away since we're kind of going back and forth. So your 4th team is
the Buffalo Bills.
All right.
And the only reason I have them at 4 is because they have 2 losses.
Yep.
But they could easily be 5 and 1. Honestly, again, even with Derrick Henry going crazy, if they convert touchdowns in the red zone rather than kicking field goals, they win that game too. So the Bills are a juggernaut, and they're partially a juggernaut because they can do all the little things well, but then they do that Patrick Mahomes type of stuff well too.
Yeah.
Josh Allen can stand back there and play like Mahomes. To me, they look like clones out there. There's not much in it between them and Herbert. And it's like the NFL is cloning these dudes and saying, this is who we want playing quarterback for us and for all of our teams. And the Bills have a really good offensive game plan. I'm always impressed with what they do with their offense. And Brian Daboll needs to be a head coach somewhere because the dude can coach. And the Titans had a good defensive game plan against Josh Allen, and Josh Allen still put 31 points on the board. So they're a great team. I think they could be top 3 easily, but the only reason they're not is because the 3 teams I have ahead of them have a better record than them.
So I'm going to guess your 3rd team is the Ravens.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. I have the Rams at 3. I think we're splitting hairs now.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know what to make of, like, the Rams have a terrible loss. I mean, the Cardinals absolutely beat them to death.
They did.
The Ravens should have a terrible loss, but they don't. So I don't know. I mean, there is something to be said about good teams win those games that they shouldn't win. Which is why it's weird the Bills lost the Steelers week 1 and couldn't put the Titans away last night or 2 nights ago. And I have the Rams at 3. I said that already. You have the Ravens at 3. So yeah, our top 5 is the same. It's just a little out of order. So your team number 2 is the Rams.
Los Angeles Rams. Yep. And I think the Rams deserve that high of a ranking, partially because, yes, the Cardinals game was an anomaly, but those games interdivisional can be a toss-up for anybody. You see those time in and time out where a bad team will beat a much better team in the division because they just know each other so well. And the Cardinals have had the Rams number lately in the past few years, and even when the Cardinals haven't been as good as they are right now. So I attribute some of that just to knowing your opponent in the division. But the Rams have looked completely unbeatable in the other 5 occasions. And you pair Sean McVay's offense with a quarterback like Matthew Stafford, I think all of us knew that they were going to instantly be Super Bowl contenders. And as long as they can stay healthy, they have a great defense. They have great special teams. They converted another fake punt last week against the Giants.
Chucking it around.
Yeah. And so, again, they're one of those teams that have very few weaknesses, if any at all. And I think that Cardinals game is a little bit of an anomaly. I'll be interested to see when they play again. I wouldn't doubt it if they split those 2 contests. Yeah. But that's the Los Angeles Rams at number 2 for me.
And they do, speaking of really good wins, they have another one of the very best wins of the year because they really took the Buccaneers apart. I mean, they was not a close game at really any point. So I'm pulling up the Rams schedule right now because I'm interested too. They play the Cardinals week 13. It's Monday night. That'll be a really fun one at Cardinals. So, and that's their sandwich. They play the Jaguars the week before, so they'll probably be rested and ready to go.
They'll be ready. Yeah.
So, and then they have your 49ers week 18, which maybe
who cares?
Win. Who cares?
Who cares?
All right. So we both have the same team at number 1. I have the Bills at number 2. They are 4-2, and maybe that's a stupid ranking. To me, they might be the most complete team I've watched, even though they've lost twice. Their defense is awesome. They have their running backs are good enough, Moss and Singletary. Their receivers are awesome. Emmanuel Sanders is really good for them, and Beasley in the spot and Diggs. I mean, that's just a lot. Dawson Knox, who broke his hand on Monday, has also been really great. I have to tell you, I had a fantasy matchup in a 14-team league. My brother and I have a team. In the span of an hour, against our team, Dawson Knox caught 2 touchdowns, and Cordero Patterson scored 3 touchdowns. And I said, what the heck am I even supposed to do with this crap? These are terrible players. And the Falcons haven't scored 3 touchdowns in a game in any other game of the season, and Patterson scored 3. Okay, fine. You win, world.
Was that the Jets game, I think?
Yes.
Falcons, Jets,
and the Texans playing the Bills. It's just like, oh, these are bad matchups.
And all I could think of when Patterson was scoring those touchdowns was crack. Yeah, that's all I could think of.
So, but Cardinals 6-0. I think Kyler Murray's probably happy he didn't choose baseball. Doesn't make me happy, but he's awesome.
I wish he had chosen baseball. I wish him and Russell Wilson and a few of those other guys.
Yeah.
Just choose baseball.
Your division baseball players. So
yeah, you're gonna make more money playing baseball, and you'll have
teammates with Clayton Kershaw growing up in Little League and in high school football. Do you know that?
I did not know that.
Now you know. So,
see,
there you go.
Idiots. Why don't you guys play baseball?
Yeah. Stafford's got a good arm. I didn't imagine he would be a good pitcher.
Yes.
So, yeah. All right. Well, this is the moment of truth. I don't remember what your original Super Bowl pick is. Oh, you picked the 49ers. So if you had to wager on it right now, what's your Super Bowl pick and winner?
Well, it's time for me to eat a whole bunch of crow, because the only bowl that the 49ers are going to be a part of is one that has no significance towards anything super. And they, yeah, right, exactly. Maybe like the Nintendo of America Bowl or something stupid like that. I picked them to go against the Bills. I'm going to keep the Bills as my AFC team. I think they are the class of the AFC. I know that Lamar and the Ravens look good, and there's other teams that could be those contenders, but it's the Bills' time. I think it's their time. They've gotten close, and they've gotten better year after year after year. And I remember that year where they had to count on Andy Dalton to win a game week 17 for them to make the playoffs, and seeing those players who had been on the Bills their whole career, like Kyle Williams, crying because they finally made the playoffs. Well, they've been on that trajectory since. And I just see them getting to the Super Bowl. In the NFC, I've got to flip-flop because the 49ers aren't going to do it. And I hate to say it, as good as the Cardinals have been, I still don't have confidence in them. I think the team to beat will be the Rams. And they've been there recently. They've had the experience in the playoffs. They have an experienced playoff coaching staff. And again, I think it's Matthew Stafford's time. So giving him that team with that coach changes everything. And I think they make it to the Super Bowl. I think they lose to the Bills eventually in that Super Bowl. And I just feel like the way that Buffalo has lost these games to the Steelers and to the Titans will be a teaching moment for them to be able to look back on and say, okay, we got those things out of the way. Now we're going to move ahead. I mean, last year's Super Bowl winner, the Buccaneers had to learn a lot during the season for them to get where they ended up. And, you see that year in and year out where teams learn from a loss or a couple weird losses. And I think Buffalo will do that. So I'm going Bills over the Rams now.
My original pick was Browns-Rams. I'm off the Browns. You made a point when I made that pick. Would you ever pick Baker against Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs? The answer is no. And I wouldn't pick him against Josh Allen either. So my new pick is Bills-Rams, just as same as yours. I'll keep the Rams. Health is a scary thing for them because they're not a deep team, but
no.
You give me Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey and co in the playoffs, I'll take it. I don't imagine Cliff Kingsbury out-dueling Sean McVay in a playoff game. I just don't see it. But I'll take the Rams to win. That was my original pick, and I will stick with that.
Nice.
Partially because you picked the Bills, and I don't want it to be exactly the same. I actually think the Bills are better than the Rams, but
yeah.
It's week 7, so who knows? So
exactly right.
All right, go ahead.
And let me just make this point too: the football is different than any other sport, especially the major sports, because you don't play series of games against your opponent. You have to win the game you're playing against them to be able to move forward. And as we've seen, there's some of these weird outcomes that happen because football's a little different. And if you show up and lay an egg, that could be the end of your season. And so, and even now, these games matter for standings and the way that the NFL playoffs work now with only one team getting a bye. It's super important not to lose those weird games. And so, yeah, I feel like things will be different. I mean, we could look back at this again in another 6 weeks and things will be vastly different.
Put on your calendar, week 12, we'll come back and do this again and see what we got. So,
yeah, yes, sir.
It'll be very interesting. So I have one NBA observation. See if I can get myself in trouble tonight. It was opening night in the NBA last night. The Nets played the Bucks. The Bucks beat them. The Nets really just needed one more score. I can't imagine where they could have gotten one from, but they really could use one more score. I don't know. Maybe he sailed off the edge of the earth or something, but they didn't have him. And look, I'll say this. I'm not for vaccine mandates. I'm not. That's part of living in the United States. You should get to pick on that kind of thing. I personally, it doesn't make any sense not to pick it to me, but that's here nor there. I don't actually know what Kyrie Irving stands for. And if I could get him to articulate that for me, I might get in his corner. But right now, I'm as far away from that corner as possible. So,
yeah.
Enjoy your time away and collecting half of a salary that none of us will ever make for letting your team down. Enjoy that.
Right.
So that's all.
Well, and honestly, the Nets are one of those teams that could win a championship. And how big is
there should win the championship.
Yes, and how narrow is that window? The windows are closing, and what you're doing is selfish. No matter which way you slice it, that's a selfish action.
You said it, not me. All right. Speaking of selfish, Ben Simmons, we have to cover that real quick too. Holy smokes. I mean, for Joel Embiid to go in front of cameras and go, I don't care about that guy anymore. He only cares about himself. the guy's still on the team.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you saw the video of him like scooting around with a phone in his pocket during practice, and like,
Yep.
I don't know, whew, that's a mess. And if I'm a Philly fan, I don't even. That's really rough. And my immediate thought, there was a time a few years ago when he was on his ascent, when his sports cards were selling for an amount of money that was obscene. And there are people right now that are going, holy cow, I am miserable. It's just a mess.
You know, the layperson like us who is not a professional athlete looks at professional athletes differently. You know, we expect something out of a professional athlete because they get paid so much, or because they're doing something that we all wish we could have done.
Correct.
And we know we would act differently given that opportunity. But I wonder, there's part of me that wonders, you know, you brought up Kyrie Irving, you bring up Ben Simmons. Mental health is a heck of a thing. And it doesn't matter whether you're making millions of dollars every year or you're making diddly squat like me. Mental health is important and it matters. And I just like that there are some athletes like Dak Prescott who have come out and said, I struggle with some things. It's okay to struggle. It's okay to admit that we're not perfect. We're not able to tackle everything all the time. Who knows, if somebody like John Gruden would have been a little bit more humble, maybe he could have corrected some of those errors that he made that led to him not being a football coach any longer. And the same for Ben Simmons. You know, you hope for a guy like that he could figure some of that out, because there's no other reason for him to act that way other than something mentally is a little bit off for him right now. So I hope for the best for him, but to have your teammate come out and say what Embiid said, that does not bode well for your season, and it doesn't bode well for you as a player, for sure.
No. Trade value is not high currently. Either of those guys. On either of them.
No.
So anyhow, all right, we'll move on. By the way, the Lakers, they're incredibly old. Russell Westbrook's not going to fit there. He's not going to have the ball. That was a terrible trade. All right, let's move on.
Stupid.
Kyle, get excited to talk about the NBA. We'll do that later next week.
Yes.
We're going to do Family Fiasco now. I asked Joel to have one ready, but I'm going to ask him a few questions about his family first, most of which I already know, but for the listeners, you know, who knows? We've been so delinquent with this podcast lately. Do we have any left? I don't know.
Not after I'm on again. They'll all be gone.
Tell us your wife's name, how long you've been married. You don't have to do too much with the kids, because I know that can be, you don't want to share too much sometimes, but you can, you know, you've already given us their ages earlier with your family trip situation. So give us a small background on your family.
Yeah, so my wife and I have been married 11 years. We got married in 2010. And so it's easy for me to keep track of how many years we've been married, because it's a nice round number to start everything off. So I'll never get that wrong, which is a blessing. Her her name is Stacy. We met in high school. We were only friends in high school, but then started dating in college, which was kind of weird because it was a long distance thing and whatnot. But she's the greatest human being on the face of the planet, and one of the biggest daily blessings to me every day is that I get to share this life with her. She's fantastic. We have two sons. I already mentioned their age is 3 and gonna be 11 months here very shortly. We actually live on my wife's parents' land that they gave to us a few years back. They gave it to us as sort of an inheritance ahead of them passing, so that they could share some things with us before they go, which was really awesome. So we built a house out here in Goshen, and we then sold some of our land for $1 to my parents, and they live on part of our land as well. So we've got a ton of help, which I think is very essential in the babysitting world. But then you have the other piece of that, which is that relationship between, grandparents, and with them being with the boys so often, they kind of have to be parental figures for them sometimes too, which can be a little bit difficult. But we're certainly thankful for that. Both my wife and I work from home. I work for a company that does virtual education for students nationwide. And I am a special programs administrator for that school that I work for. It's a really cool opportunity that I jumped onto a couple years back. And my wife does cancer research from home for a company called Flatiron out of New York City. And just a really great gig for her. She gets to help people and gets to make a difference in the healthcare world. And we get to do it from home. So we get to see our kids grow up and help with that process. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. So that's kind of a window into our little life here.
Sweet. Do you have a fiasco, or was that?
Yeah. So part of that kind of blends into my fiasco. Of course, I mentioned that we went on vacation with my family. We own a Tesla Model Y, and it's the only car we own. We sold 2 vehicles to buy it. With us both working from home, we felt like it was a good investment. We don't need to worry about gas anymore. And we just, we don't need more than one car. Though it's an expensive investment, we feel like it's paid off time and time again for us. We went on this trip, and now Tesla's offering their full self-driving as a subscription. So you can get full self-driving for $200 a month rather than paying 10 grand for it up front. So I said, okay, we're going to go on this trip. Having full self-driving is security for me. Driving all that way makes me feel better about having my family in the car and whatnot. So we went ahead and did it. As a part of that full self-driving, you get the summon feature, which you've probably seen or heard about. You can call the car out of a parking spot, right? So I did this at one of the parking spots we were in on vacation. I moved the car forward so that it was easier for my wife to get into the car rather than having to open it next to another car. So she didn't have to open the door into the other car. Move the car forward on its own. It's just kind of a cool feature. Then there's a bunch of traffic through this part of the parking lot happening in about that very moment. So I had to quickly move the car back before I could even get in it. So I moved it back, waited, traffic went by, and then I get into the car, and my son is in the back seat in his car seat, and we're all ready to go. I look both ways. I am driving the car at this moment. Not it summoning itself, not it driving itself, me. I look to my left, look to my right, check for traffic, everything's good. Start to pull out, 2 bicycles come from my left, right in front of the car. So I instinctively turn the wheel hard to the right and slam on the brakes. Bicycles go by. Okay, everything's fine. Oh, dodged a bullet. Could have hit a bicyclist. That would have been really bad. Huge fiasco. But I was parked next to a curb, and I had cranked the wheel to the right. And I slammed the gas after that to get out of that crazy parking lot and went bam into the curb with my wheel. And we are on vacation in South Carolina. The curb was sharp and tall, probably about 6 inches tall. Not only did it totally mess up my wheel, but it gouged a hole in the sidewall of my tire. Oh, and we are in a completely different state. So needless to say, I'm kind of a neat freak. I like to keep my vehicles pristine. I wash them. It's just like, I feel like God's given us a gift. I should take care of it. And now I got this gouged up tire and this horrible rim. And I felt like, what a ridiculous idiot I am. I should have just let the car drive itself out of the parking lot. It would have been safer for me than me actually getting behind that stupid wheel. So that's my family fiasco.
Outstanding. Well, you got that honest. We spent many a Saturday cleaning the Chevy Malibu before we went and played our one-on-one basketball games at your house on, I have it right, County Road 27. So
He's a genius.
Yeah. I got the Malibu with you, and I got Alex's cats jumping on me while I destroy him in Sega Dreamcast. So Well, what a perfect segue. I'm actually going to do friend fiasco tonight, and it's all about cars. So in high school, Joel was around for 3 different car crashes that happened not on the road. So number one will involve Joel very much. Joel and Alex and Sean and maybe some other people were over for an overnight stay at my house, and we were heading out to do some hijinks, and we get in Sean's car, so I was made Sean drive, and his Lumina, and Sean is excited about what we're off to do, and just back straight into Joel's car, just drills. And Joel, being who he is and who his father is, Mr. Dennis, immediately loses his mind and absolutely lets Sean have it. And Sean blames Joel for parking behind him, and Joel blames Sean for, not looking at all when he backed up. It ended up, I think only issue was on the back of Sean's car, and everybody cooler heads prevailed, and we calmed down and probably went out and TP'd somebody. But that was
not my finest moment here.
No. So we're gonna stay with Sean for a minute. Actually, Sean's involved in all 3 of these. He's a friend of the podcast. You saw him talk about the Colts with me a few weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, I guess. I don't know if you were in the car for this one. We got done with a Little League game. We were all of driving age at this point, but again, Sean always drove. And so we pulled into a pizza restaurant. It was too full. We decided not to stay. So I'm sitting on the right passenger in the back seat on the right side. And Sean is pulling out of this parking spot. And it's just a regular old parking spot, plenty of room behind him. And he just cranks it all the way. And I'm sitting over there next to this car that's right next to us on the right side. And I'm like, he's going to hit this car. He's going to hit. It's like slow motion, because literally he's just backing out very slowly. The front right side of his car just goes all the way down this car. And so he's like, oh my gosh, I can believe it. What the heck? Like, you left the car before you even got anywhere near out of the parking space. He's like, what do I do? So we went in and found the person whose car he had. I mean, like, it's an embarrassing situation. And the guy came out and he was like, not even worried. I mean, it scratched the heck out of this car. The guy's like, don't even worry about it. There's no problem. So
if I might be misremembering that moment, but I think I remember our other friend Austin being in the restaurant and coming out of the restaurant and seeing it happen, and him frantically waving at Sean as he was scraping the car, like, no, stop. And then Austin, always being the wisest of all of us and, the smartest, he basically says, Sean, you got to go in there and find these people. Because Sean was in shock at the moment, and rightfully so. I would have been too. But Austin says, you got to go find these people. And yes, luckily that person was very gracious, because it was a tragedy. I was in the front passenger seat, and I was kind of like Jesse. We were both seeing it happen, but there was no words that could come out of our mouth. I was just like, and then just all the way across the car. So slow motion too. Like, oh no. And it was too late by the time he could do anything about it.
Unbelievable. I have a bonus Sean one. Sorry, Sean. You're getting killed right now, but you're gonna have the last laugh on the last
Sean.
I'm over at Austin's house with Sean one night, and Austin had just gotten a little mini dirt bike. And so he's teaching Sean to ride this thing. And Sean had brought his sister's new truck over. She had just gotten it. I don't know why he drove it over, but he did. And so Austin's teaching him, and Sean's riding it around, but he's still a little like, and listen, I'm not good at this kind of stuff, but he's like sitting on it, pointed right at this truck, and he's like, Austin's still like showing him some things, and he accidentally hits the gas, and then he panics and he hits it harder, and he goes flying into the side panel of his sister's truck. And puts a humongous dent in this brand new. I was jumping on the trampoline right next to it as it happened, and I checked to make sure Sean was okay, and I literally fell over laughing. I only have ever laughed that hard in my life, except for the story I'm about to tell. He put a huge dent in her truck, in Samantha's truck. So this last one, we're playing in the state tournament for Little League or something, and like idiots, because it's at our home park, we're parking in a circle behind the center field fence. And so everybody's pulled in. Our dear friend Alex Smith is the last one to pull in. He was also on this talking about the Bears. And he gets it in there, but he needs to back up a little bit to get his car into the circle. So he does back up, but then he's going to pull forward, right? Because he backed as far as he could get to pull forward. And the problem is he never put it in drive. It was still in reverse. I am standing 10 feet away watching this unfold. So he looks back forward. He was looking back. He turns forward. He lets off the brake. I'll never forget this as long as I off the brake, and the car goes backwards, but he's facing forward. He panics, and he slams on the accelerator, and he goes back into Sean's car. So fast. And his bumper goes under his back bumper. It pushes Sean's car up on top of it, and Sean is still in his car. And the look on Sean's face. Alex doesn't know what's going on. Sean's car is up on top of Alex's car. And it's the funniest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Nothing will ever top it, ever.
No.
And Alex has to pull forward. Sean's car comes crashing back down. And there wasn't a scratch on either car. I don't know.
Cars were made differently back in the day. That's so two things about that story that are hilarious, because I was in the same position as you were, 10 feet away, watching all this happen. And the funniest thing was Alex looking forward, expecting to go forward, and then going backwards, because he's just like, okay, concentrating like, oh, get out. And then just, bam! Oh, it was so funny. And then you're right. Sean's reaction was as good as it gets, because Sean's a very patient man and really understanding, and just the look on his face in that moment. And Sean, rightfully so, was just like, what are you doing? What is wrong with you? Oh, so funny. So good.
Anyhow, here's the truth. Alex, I took driver's ed with, okay? The first day, he couldn't, they were going to let us go out on the road, and he couldn't get the car turned on. So he tried to put it in gear without turning the car on.
Oh, things have changed.
It was me and him and Ken Grover in the car. That was our driver's ed car. And he's trying to yank it into gear, and the guy made him get out and put someone else in the car. And that's the guy that backed into Sean's car.
Listen, things have changed. These people don't do these things anymore. Things have completely changed. But this is why I am terrified of when my kids become the age to drive.
Seriously.
Because you better count on them having multiple accidents. It will happen, no matter what you do.
So, anyhow, after all of that, I did mention to you, if there's anything you and the wife or just you have been watching, movie, show, whatever, that you would recommend, you're welcome to throw that out there as we finish up after that lunacy that 4 people will really love, because they know all the people involved, and the rest of it is like stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Yes. There'll be a lot of people going, what are these two lunatics laughing about? Like, I'm sure it was funny to them. Uh, my my only recommendation: watch Dave Chappelle's new comedy special on Netflix. It is extraordinary. I laughed so hard at a few things. I know it's got some controversy behind it, but if you can listen to what he's actually saying through the controversy and you appreciate his humor, I would highly recommend it. It's not for little ears, for sure, as anyone would know. So, I don't recommend you watching it in the company of anyone that you would need to impress. But I watched it last night on my phone with my headphones on and just was laughing uncontrollably. So I recommend that new special from Dave Chappelle. He says it's going to be his last.
Doesn't surprise me. We're still binge watching Community, so I don't have anything new to recommend, but I do love that show. I really do. And someone new started working with us, a new pastor at our church who's about my age, and he had never seen Parks and Rec, of which I admonished him about. So that'd be my recommendation. Go back and watch that show. It's awesome. That's all I got. Well, thanks for coming on and laughing with me and giving us some actual good football content for once. So
thank you. I appreciate it. I wish Kyle was here. He always gives those poignant little tidbits. He's so good at that. Hoping that he feels better, but I appreciate you guys having me on. It is always a pleasure. I just like the conversation too. We live thousands of miles apart now.
we do.
So anytime we can spend reminiscing, talking through sports and things like that, it feels like I'm 18 again. And so, I'm nowhere near that now. I'm close to
getting there.
Yeah, close to double that age. So yeah, it's fun to do this. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, I was talking to Kyle the other day about somehow being in Kansas City for when I played summer baseball there in college came up. And I was like, yeah, like 9 years ago. And then I was like, nope, 14 years ago, actually. That is awful. And now I must go away. So there we are. But anyhow, all right. Well, good to see you, my friend. We'll talk to you soon.
You too. Yep. Thanks.